Okay, today we're going to learn about Groundhog's Day and the groundhog and what it means to hibernate and what the history of the holiday is all about. So let's learn a little bit about Groundhog's Day itself. Groundhog Day is celebrated on February 2nd, and some people believe that on this day of the year, watching groundhogs can predict when spring will come. Old stories say that if a groundhog sees its shadow on February 2nd, there'll be about 6 more weeks of winter. Those stories also say that if a groundhog doesn't see its shadow on February 2nd, spring will come early. So it all depends on whether he sees a shadow or not as to whether we have 6 more weeks of winter or if spring comes early. Now, let's learn some things. Groundhog Day actually originated in Europe from old customs and beliefs. And people always thought that they could predict when spring would come by watching particular animals. They believed that if animals woke up from their hibernation in the beginning of February and saw its shadow, that we would have more winter, or if they didn't see its shadow, spring would just be right around the corner. They didn't always just watch groundhogs. They watched animals such as hedgehogs, bears, badgers, any animals that would hibernate. Now, I'm going to explain to you what hibernate means. Hibernate means that that you would go to sleep for a long period of time through winter. And that's why bears and hedgehogs and groundhogs and badgers, they would all go to sleep for the winter. They would eat a lot right at the beginning of the winter, and that fat stored up would allow them to sleep all through the winter. Their heart rate drops down, their metabolism or the way their body operates gets really, really slow. And so, actually, Groundhog Day and the groundhog is celebrated in Pennsylvania. So, there were a lot of groundhogs in Pennsylvania, so it seemed logical to choose the groundhog to predict when spring would arrive. The actual Groundhog Day became a celebration a long time ago in 1866, and this man named Clymer Fries wrote it in a town newspaper that February 2nd would be called Groundhog Day. In Puxatawney, Pennsylvania, the special groundhog is always called Puxatawney Phil. So every year on February 2nd, thousands of people would show up to find out if Puxatawney Phil would see his shadow. They have a big stage, and Phil is kept in a burrow under a fake tree stump, and town officials take him out of the burrow at exactly 7:25 a.m. as everybody cheers. There's thousands of people there. And if Puxatawney Phil sees his shadow, winter will last longer. If he doesn't see his shadow, spring will come sooner. The officials pretend as if Phil whispers to one of them whether or not he sees his shadow. And they make a big drama and a big deal out of it. Sometimes Phil is right, and other times he's wrong. Groundhog Day is a very fun tradition that people in Puxatawney love to celebrate. So now let's learn about the groundhog. Groundhogs are found in all parts of the United States and Canada. They live in burrows, and they dig out with their sharp curved front claws. So they dig out a lot. They burrow under things, and that's where they live. They actually burrow a hole in the ground, and that's where they live. Fun facts about groundhogs is the reason they stay underground is because they're so they don't get eaten by other animals. They can run underneath the ground in their burrows, and the other animals like foxes and coyotes and hawks and eagles can't get to them. They also, when they're outside their burrows, they sit up straight with their front paws held tight against their body so that they can eat and constantly watch for danger. They're always moving their head and their eyes. When danger is near, you can hear a groundhog make a sharp, high-pitched whistle. So that's one reason that some of them, there's a nickname for a groundhog called a whistle pig, because they make that sharp, high-pitched whistle to warn other groundhogs that a predator is near. So a natural enemy of a groundhog are wolves, foxes, and hawks. During the summer, groundhogs eat as much as they can to increase their body fat. That's what I was saying earlier, because they want to hibernate in the wintertime, and so they need to build up as much body fat as they can, so they eat as much as they can all summer and fall. Then in the fall, they go into their burrows to hibernate through the cold winter months. So they live off that fat all winter long. And to save energy, their body temperature drops down really slow. Like I said before, their metabolism, their heart rate, their breathing, all drops down really slow so that they can last all winter. People sometimes, they have fun deciding whether Punxsutawney Phil is going to see his shadow or whether he's not going to see his shadow. Sometimes he's right, sometimes he's not. So one really interesting thing about groundhogs is when they hibernate, their teeth stop growing. Like beavers, their teeth continuously grow. That's why they have to chew on wood and cut down trees all the time, because their teeth are constantly growing. And if they didn't chew on anything, their teeth would finally grow up into their skull and they would die. So that's why they keep chewing on wood and other objects, so they can keep their teeth ground down. Like I said before, that when they hibernate, their metabolism is very, very slow, and they only take about one breath about every 10 minutes. That's a very interesting thing about groundhogs. And because they burrow in the dirt all the time, they can remove about 700 pounds of dirt a day when they're digging a big burrow. That's a lot of dirt, 700 pounds. Most of the time, groundhogs live alone. They have their own burrow, they have their own hole that they dig into, but the hole that they actually hibernate in is the deepest one. They want to make it very deep so no predators can get at them, and that it doesn't get cold, because the ground, if it freezes, they could die because they would get really cold. Groundhogs live to be about 8 years old, and so they live in colonies, but they just live alone in their own burrow. So it's very interesting facts about groundhogs and Groundhog Day. So whenever February comes rolling around, and February 2nd, and you see it on the news, Punxsutawney Phil, whether he saw his shadow or whether he didn't see his shadow, and that's the background behind Groundhog Day and groundhogs themselves. So I hope you enjoyed this lesson.